Are you sure?
I'm sure. It never did that before.
Ben 10 Alien Force, the cartoon sequel to the original Ben 10 that helped expand upon the universe that Ben 10 had originated, with previous villains returning and plenty of new characters and aliens to make things even more interesting. This expansion also told the story of a maturing Ben Tennyson who had to take more responsibilities for the actions he did and for wielding the Omnitrix's powers. To me, this was just as interesting as the original show and was always an enjoyable show to watch. And just like the original series, it also got a video game, and it actually plays pretty similarly to Protector of Earth, which I already reviewed. Since both games are pretty similar in design, I'll be comparing some things to Protector of Earth, so for some things that I mentioned, it'd be better for you to watch the Protector of Earth review before this one, so that way you'll have even more of an understanding of where I'm coming from for some of these things that I say. But anyways, today we'll be looking at the Ben 10 Alien Force video game. Ben, Gwen, and Kevin are on their way to the amusement pier when they run into the Forever Knights with Kevin's alien tech tracker. They follow them as the Forever Knights are trying to get a piece of alien tech buried near the pier. Ben then runs into a four-armed plumber, Tetraman. Some people are really sensitive about that. Anyways, he runs into a Tetraman plumber named Gorvin. Gorvin explains that he's trying to retrieve some illegal alien tech, and the gang goes along with this. Ben, Gwen, and Kevin then go to various facilities to get tech components and bring them back to Gorvin, who, not suspiciously at all, takes the components himself for safekeeping. Of course, the gang has their suspicions on the guy. Thank goodness, because it's not like it wasn't obvious at all. Even with such suspicions, they continue to retrieve another component but keep an eye out on him. Once the next piece of tech is brought back, the gang finds out in Grandpa Max's secret files that Gorvin is a traitor of the plumbers who was thrown out for stealing and selling illegal alien tech. Ben then defeats Gorvin and heads back to Gwen and Kevin, who explains that the final component was a sub-energy core hidden within the base. Suddenly, a hybrid breaks in and steals all the components. The gang follows the hybrid to a weather tower array, defeating D and aliens. They then get rid of the force fields for them as well as the weather towers. Once the array is destroyed, the gang discovers that the hybrid are going to make a giant ark. Overall, this story was a lot simpler than what Protector of Earth provided, with less people with motives being involved in the story, making it easier to follow. It's more concise with things feeling more important, and I like that more over what the last game tried to do. Although I am curious as to why this game doesn't connect with Protector of Earth, since that game did have a cliffhanger at the end with Vilgax. Maybe Vilgax Attacks has connections to it, which I might find out later, who knows. But I do know that this game's ending is essentially talking about the whole arc thing that happened in the actual show itself. Though this game doesn't actually have any form of continuity with it, it is still nice that I guess that it connects to it. It's a little weird how some events are technically right, but also they aren't true either, but it's whatever. I will not lie to you. Compared to Protector of Earth, this game's presentation sucks. This game doesn't have as much of a cartoonish look as Protector of Earth, which wouldn't necessarily be a problem if it weren't for a few things. In-game models are fine, aside from Gwen. To be honest, Gwen looks like she had plastic surgery go horribly wrong, and there's not really much that they can do about her neck. To be fair, Gwen had a very long neck in the show, so I can't exactly argue against it for being inaccurate, but everything else about her is just butchered. Render cutscenes look kinda blurry, and sometimes it even hurt to look at due to how blurry they were. The menus for this game are incredibly boring. Most of them are just generic green and black colors, and for some of them they just randomly show up out of nowhere. I actually felt like I got jump scared by the level up menu because they appear so suddenly with no form of indication or build up to it. Some of them don't even have sound effects for actually moving through the menus, which doesn't help its case either. Menu navigation in general is just so boring. By the way, in my Protector of Earth review, I mentioned that the alien transformations not being remade was lazy and should have been redone since it clashes with how the rest of the art style looks. To be honest, I take everything I said about that back. You wanna know why I think that? Because this game actually does that. And it sucks. It's underwhelming and is only shown once in the entire game. With how it looks, the creators might as well have just not done this. If they just did a green flash, I would have been perfectly fine with that. But considering that they only do it once and not with any other aliens in the entire game, and the one time they do it looked horrible, I feel like they just shouldn't have done it. The music is super repetitive. You don't know how many battles I went into and heard what felt like the same exact song over and over again. The songs most of the time never felt any different unless it was a boss fight, and even then it's not like the songs were memorable at all. Now I'd be lying if I said that the music didn't sound like it came from the show, which it does, but I heard what felt like the same song all the time. At the very least, the voice actors and writing of the show are the same. I think that's the only thing I like about this game presentation wise. You can play as Ben, Swampfire, Big Chill, Spider Monkey, Jet Ray, and Humongosaur as you defeat enemies and cross gaps. You can change Ben into his alien forms when the Omnitrix gauge is filled up. You can revert from any alien form before said gauge runs out. Ben will automatically switch from an alien form if the gauge becomes empty or if he takes too much damage while in an alien form. Although there are a few times where the Omnitrix lasts forever, which doesn't make sense. To be fair though, sometimes the Omnitrix kinda did whatever it wanted in the show, so I guess that's also representative of that. That's besides the point. After turning back into Ben, you have to wait a short amount of time before you can turn into another alien. The amount of time you'll have to wait depends on how filled the gauge was when you changed into Ben. By defeating enemies, Ben is able to gain experience, and once he's gotten enough, he is able to unlock a combo move, which I will explain in a bit, for whatever alien you choose. At times, you'll have the ability to play as Gwen and Kevin. Gwen uses a mixture of martial arts and mana control to defeat enemies. She's also able to activate an energy shield which protects herself from damage. Her mana gauge refills over time when it's not in use. She can also glide for a period of time. Kevin, alongside his brute strength, can absorb the characteristics of material nearby that's just floating around for whatever odd reason. This allows him to take extra damage without having to worry about his health. It also affects his speed, and when he dodges, he's able to throw an object. Neither Gwen or Kevin can gain experience, unfortunately. Each character has light, heavy, and special attacks that they can use to perform a variety of combos. There are air attacks that can be used to hit both air and ground enemies as well. Special attacks in certain combos utilizes a person's particular powers and cost more of their special gauge to use. Throughout the levels, there are pickup items you can get by destroying breakable objects. There are ones that refill your health or your special gauges, and others are temporary power-ups which can increase your damage or make you invincible. These can also be found out in the open if you look hard enough. Sometimes you don't really need to look at all though. You might also stumble upon plumber's badges that are in every level of the game. Collecting them unlocks bonus content that you can view in the main menu. Some of these you will have to come back to later to get, since you'll occasionally need the power of certain aliens you get later on in the game. Gwen and Kevin will help you out by giving you tips whenever a new enemy show up. They'll give a small description about the enemy as well as stats about them. By the way, a lot of this sounds very similar to the Protector of Earth review, but again, this game is similar to that one, so that's kinda to be expected. I at least changed the phrasing of some sentences so they don't sound exactly the same as that one. The aliens are more balanced this time around. The previous game had the big issue of Cannonball basically being so strong that I had almost no reason to use the other aliens, and Ben was completely useless since his dodge basically didn't work. However, each alien feels at least semi-reliable, with no one really standing too far above the others. Even Ben himself feels decently good compared to before, since he feels like he can fight back compared to his younger self. Ben also has a dodge roll that actually has invincibility frames, and when I get hit while performing moves, I'll either take damage but won't stagger after the move is over, or take damage and stagger at the same time depending on the attack. This was a major issue that I had with Protector of Earth, as it caused me to end up getting stun locked into combos and sometimes doing enough damage to kill me. Not only is this no longer an issue in this game, but I can even block to cancel most attacks, allowing me to react to enemies instead of just having to hope that they don't do anything. Unfortunately though, that's all I have good to say. I'm not able to play as more aliens. This is a similar complaint that I had with Protector of Earth 2, so maybe I should just get used to this for a while. But when it comes to Alien Force, this game manages to make the situation even worse than it already was. In Protector of Earth, the story gave a reason as to why Ben couldn't use his other forms. This game gives no reason at all. Ben just isn't able to use some of his aliens and just gets them back at times. The fact that there isn't even a reason for this is infuriating, especially since earlier levels of the game has areas you can't access without the aliens you don't have at that point. It legitimately feels like the game is just not letting me be able to get to these areas rather than the story assisting with that. However, there is a way to play as some of the other aliens, by playing the inferior looking DS version, which doesn't have some of the aliens in this version, which means if you want to play as a particular alien, you'll have to choose between a decent looking version and this. By the way, remember in my Protector of Earth video where I brought up a particular alien? Since they were the first ones to ever be shown off on the show aside from Heat Blast, there could have even been a more obscure one like Blitzwolfer or Upchuck. It's funny that past me said that, because while doing research for this game, I discovered that you actually can play as Upchuck in Protector of Earth on the DS version with a cheat that lasts 6 seconds and it defeats every enemy on screen. I figured I should mention that because it's very coincidental that I mentioned Upchuck and I didn't mention it in that review. Well, at least you get to play as Gwen and Kevin. Yes, in this version of the game, not the DS, and you only play as them twice. They could have gotten a little bit more screen time for playability. And speaking of those two, they managed to hold your hand even more in this game than the last one. At some points, if you didn't do something within 2 seconds, they would give the most obvious expression for which alien you use, and it feels very belittling because it feels like the player can't figure it out or remember it on their own. I'm fine with this occurring after a bit of time, but not as soon as I get to an obstacle that's in my way. Also, levels felt way too long. A lot of the time, levels went on for around 40 minutes. Why? Most of them don't even include Kevin and Gwen portions, so they didn't need to be longer for that reason. Protector of Earth didn't feel this way because things like boss fights and mob fights were made into separate levels. Now, yes, combining them can work. In fact, plenty of games exist where this is a thing. I mean, Mega Man is literally this. But the standard level before these bosses shouldn't be so long if you're going to combine them. If you're on handheld, this might be okay if you're on like a long trip or something. But if you're just at home doing this might feel annoying to you. Alongside this and the repetitive music that I mentioned earlier, you can't go backwards in levels, and it's not like the areas physically lock off. No. An invisible wall keeps you from moving backwards. This means if you miss an upgrade or anything like that, too bad, you gotta restart the whole level. This also affects combat because you can't see the invisible walls around you, so you could try to run and suddenly bump into said walls. Aliens have less usefulness outside of combat. While they still do use their abilities outside of combat, it feels like it was used way less in this game than the last one. Each character felt like you really only used them once for puzzles, with a few of them having a lot more for navigation. However, you do have the Kevin and Gwen portions of the game, which I guess fills in a little bit of that space, but I do feel like Ben's aliens should have more representation of what else they can do alongside their combat, because not all aliens are just made for the combat purposes. This game seemed to be almost a complete flip of how the last game was in every regard. Some of the things that I didn't like before or felt okay about, being the technical side of combat and story, were made better in this game. But everything I did like, being the general combat and the art style of the game, were completely butchered, and the other things that I didn't like were made even worse. Going through this game ended up being more of a pain than I thought it would be because of the fact that so many things were an exact opposite of how the previous game was. If this came before Protector of Earth, I might not be too harsh on it, but since this game came after the first one, which was pretty good to begin with, I expected things to overall improve, but things took many more steps back than they did forward. Sure, the story's better, but since I look at video games with gameplay being the most important quality, if that's not good, it doesn't help a lot of the other things' case, and that's what made this game really disappointing to me. What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and thank you guys for making it to the very end of this video. Now, one thing I want to say is thank you guys for the support on my first Ben 10 review, because that's the most viewed and liked review video that I've ever done, which is very surprising. So I'm somewhat hoping that this game will kind of follow suit with that. Whether that will happen or not, who actually knows, but goodness, this game was not all that satisfying. I really do hope that the future games do improve from here on out. I do expect maybe at least one drop later in the series where a game will be worse, but I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. So the next Ben 10 game I'll do, whenever I get around to that, will be Ben 10 Alien Force Vilgas Attacks. Again, I don't know when I'm going to do that, but that's going to be the next one that I do end up doing. But I figured I might as well do another Ben 10 review, just to satisfy some of the Ben 10 and Cartoon Network fans. And speaking of Cartoon Network, I do want to try and do more Cartoon Network games, considering that Cartoon Network was a pretty big part of my childhood, so it would be easier to incorporate those games since I've already watched a decent amount of the shows. And right now I'm actually watching a show that I didn't watch. I know that completely goes against what I just said, but it did have a little bit of a tie to Ben 10, so if you know what that is, congrats. I know I'm being extremely vague, but for those of you who realize what it is, congrats, because I'm going to be doing a game for that later as well, but I'll keep that a secret for now. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more, as well as share this video out with your friends, family, and others who might be interested. In my description, I have all of my social media. My Twitter, Instagram, Discord, and Facebook are all in the description, and they are all ways of making sure that you guys know when I'm going to be uploading my next video. But until next video, take care.
I want you for a lifetime.